Welcome to BPO and GBS Global Trends, and specifically the feedback from the CXOutsourcers Mindshare event, which is now 2 weeks ago in Atlanta that I was privileged to attend. Just a few housekeeping notes. The session is being recorded. Please also use the Q&A and the chat boxes down at the bottom of your screen there. And without further ado, I'm going to really delve right into it there. And first off, just introductions. We'll start with you, Peter. I want you to give us a very brief background to Ryan Strategic Advisory, what you do as a advisor, as an analyst, as a consultant, and how did you get into this side of the industry?
Thanks for the introduction, Rod, and it's great to be here with so many friends I see who've joined from around the world. So I've been working as an analyst and advisor in the outsourcing and contact center space now for 21 years, and I got my start in London in 2003. Working for an amazing company called Data Monitor, which then evolved into an organization called Ovum. And I decided in 2016, with the encouragement of yourself and I think a little bit of lubrication in Rod's bar in your house, that it might be time
it well.
I'm glad you remember it. We decided that it was probably time for me to break out on my own, and in 2016 founded Ryan Strategic Advisory, where we work with clients in the outsourcing sector literally around the world. And I'm privileged to have amongst my business partners in crime, the two individuals that you see on the screen with me today, Ms. Freeman and Mr. Angus.
Excellent. Peter, just briefly touch on the back office Omnibus survey. We will go into it in more detail a little later this afternoon.
Sure. So the front office CX Omnibus survey is an annual initiative started by Ryan Strategic Advisory in 2016. And the idea is that we go out and we speak with 750 enterprise CX decision makers in 11 key demand markets found in Asia Pacific, North America, and Western Europe to find out what their views are when it comes to customer experience management within the scope of their own operations, their views on how procurement is going to play with regards to technology solutions, with regards to outsourcing partners, and really get us almost like a pulse check, Rod, in terms of where the industry is right now from the buyer perspective. This survey allows both technology firms that sell into the CX space, as well as the outsourcing community that are looking for enterprise CX clients, to have an idea about how best to position themselves around the pain points enterprises are dealing with, on top of the fact that it's an understanding about what the priorities of enterprise CX decision makers are.
Okay, excellent. As I said, we'll pop back into that just now with the updates on that. Mark, I know you and I started working together, was it 2006, 2007? Mm-hmm. I think we produced what was then the first ever comprehensive market research survey of the CX BPO industry. That was Knowledge Executive back in the day. So take us into where you are now as GBS World and Genesis GBS.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rod. So I started in the industry about 17 years ago, so just a little bit after Peter. And at that stage, it was in around 2008 that we put out the first national quantification survey, BPO and call center quantification survey for the South African sector. And it was around then that I met you and Traci. And it was the two of you that actually influenced me to join this sector. So I'm so glad that I was able to, and you provided a lot of mentorship to me as well. So I want to thank you for that. And in that period, we've published a lot of global research, national research on Africa, research on buy-side trends, supply-side trends. And so it's been a fantastic journey to where we are now.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. And now, Traci, last but not least, as an introductions, Believe Consulting, your role now in the greater GBS and BPO industry globally, where do you see yourself in this space?
Thanks, Rod. We're doing all sorts of interesting things. So, I mean, beyond the CXOutsourcers event, which we've enjoyed putting on for the last 5 years, there's been a lot of roles that I've supported playing with regards to standardization globally, working with the global ISO community, and having had my roots in that with having brought COPC into the country in the early 2000s. And then obviously a big passion point for me is around really social impact. So looking at impact sourcing, and that really stemmed out of the role that I played with working with the Rockefeller Foundation when they started looking at Africa as an offshore destination. So looking at the standards, looking at impact sourcing, it's really working with organizations about how they can improve their service delivery and make a difference at the same time.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, Peter. The origins of CX outsourcers. Traci's just mentioned it goes back 5 years, and the Atlanta CXO that I was privileged to be part of, I believe, was the fifth one. What gave rise to CX outsourcers? I think just give it a bit of background as to what was motivating the need for this Mindshare Group.
Well, Rod, it's a really good question, and indeed, this was the fifth one that we put on. The impetus for this event, funnily enough, came from Traci herself. I remember chatting with Trace. This is going back pre-pandemic times, probably end of 2017, sort of 2018, and Traci had suggested to me that the industry was requiring an event of a nature that was going to be not a selling event, but more of a networking, and one where thought leadership was at play. And she'd suggested reaching out to Mark. Now, Mark and I had been friends for a while. I didn't know that this was also on Mark's mind. So Mark and I very quickly, and I think, Mark, you'll agree, in probably lightning fast fashion, in about 5 months, put on the first CX Outsourcers in Las Vegas in June of 2018, and I remember it was a scorchingly hot period. Traci and Mark were both there. I remember at 6 p.m. on the first night, it was like still 49 degrees Celsius outside. Really unthinkable when you contemplate what we put together in a very brief amount of time in terms of speakers, selling tickets, sponsorships, being on the ground in one of the hottest periods ever that Las Vegas ever recorded. But it really snowballed since then, Rod, because the following year, we decided, the three of us held the event in Windsor in the United Kingdom, just outside of London, and we increased the size of the event, we increased the number of sponsors, and we, I think, really found our footing in terms of understanding what the balance needed to be between the thought leadership, the networking, the experiential nature that I think Traci always so very well encapsulates when we talk to people about CXO is not just a conference, but it's an experience, and everything has got to be unique. Everything has got to be original, down to the location and the venue, which you experienced in Atlanta, where I think we really nailed it.
Absolutely.
You know, Rod, when it comes right down to it, and I'd love to get Trace and Mark to chime in on this too, we want people to walk away from the event knowing more and feeling more confident and informed to deal with the challenges coming forward after CXO and into the following year than they were coming into it. But we also want them to enjoy themselves. We want them to have a good time. And as I think our friend Cheryl Parwater mentioned in an interview that is going to be published very soon, it's like a family reunion for many people. Friendships have been formed, partnerships have been formed, a bond has been formed, so to speak. Indeed,
yeah. And Traci, coming back to you, and I'd be really interested to get your perspective on the provider side, the BPO operators out there. They have challenges, they have problems, they have opportunities, and you see it from almost a helicopter vision view. So how does that fit in with the CX outsourcer model?
Yeah, thanks, Rod. And I actually think that's the nub of it, right? Why the gents and myself have seen the continuation of the event is that there's no other event that allows a convening of global BPO operators to get together in a safe space to share their aches, their pains, their dreams, what it is the clients are looking for, and for them to actually connect and share what those challenges and problems are. And often, I mean, we all know running business, you sit there assuming you're the only one having the challenge. Who do you reach out to unless you have a specific mentor group? So this allows for the operators to actually connect. It allows for emerging operators to come into the space and ensure that, they're viewing excellence and they're asking all the right questions from the beginning. But equally, we have these global competitors that sit across from one another And without obviously sharing their secret sauce, they get to share what the aches and pains and challenges are. And what I love about that is that it's exclusive for BPO. So unless you're a BPO, you cannot actually book a delegate ticket. But it allows for us to actually support them in producing the next age of the CX and BPO sector, because they're forging forward collectively together on behalf of the sector and for our clients and customers.
No, you're so right. In fact, the event 2 weeks ago, I was fascinated by, never mind what happened in the event itself, but the discussions that took place over a few beers in the pub afterwards, with 3 or 4 competitors sharing experiences, opportunities, and almost in co-opetition, shall we say. And I found that fascinating. Mark, you're sitting in the back room doing all the research across the world as to what's happening, looking at the trends, etc. How does that input into the CX Outsourcers Mindshare model? So, what is the research telling you and telling us as an industry?
Well, it's interesting you should say that in terms of the research being part of it, because when we started the Mindshare, we wanted to share our collective research. So Peter puts out a lot of research, we put out research, and we wanted to share that research with the industry. And then we realized that for it to be meaningful, we needed to bring in other analysts, other research consultants to also share their collective and strategic insights. And I think that mixture is really what a nice soup, if you want to call it, where it's kind of a mixture of ingredients. You get to hear not only from us in terms of what are the global trends, and to speak to that, there's a lot of pressure right now on BPO from a number of different factors, from AI, from the talent gap, from the constant pressures to achieve cost performance. So there's a lot of those pressures, and compliance is another one that's also top of mind of a lot of BPOs. And so we wanted to make sure that they were able to get the full suite of insights from not only ourselves but also from other industry research industry consultants. And I like what Traci said about what you also said about the co-opetition factor. We never knew what would happen when we got a whole bunch of competitors into the room. In fact, I remember when we first put the 2018 event together, Peter and I and Traci, we were thinking, what have we done? What is going to happen from this? Are these guys going to actually interact? And they did. And I think it just amazes me yet again that the industry can unite behind this common purpose of improving customer experience with great human talent, backed by purpose-driven initiatives.
Wonderful, excellent. I'm keeping an eye on the clock here, and I want to jump a little bit forward. Peter, over to you. The 2024 Front Office Omnibus survey that we all wait in anticipation, and the great reveal in Atlanta last week or week before last. Would you please just give us the highlights of the findings, I think right from the top, and the countries that emerged as the leaders in the global preferences for BPO locations.
Sure.
And then I'm going to ask you just to expand on that, is what can particularly the operators do from the marketing, market development, sales development to improve buy-side perspectives of their offerings? So it's a bit of a lump there, but let's kick off with Omnibus Survey 2024.
So the question I think you're referring to in this one, Rod, that you talk about the big reveal, that is the question that we ask each year the operators if they can give us their sense about the most favored offshore or nearshore location that they would consider for customer experience management delivering into their market to their customer base. Now, we had, as I mentioned, 750 respondents from 11 different countries, and this year's number one location was, for the second year in a row, India, definitively. Now, we can recall a couple of years ago, India and South Africa were tied. Last year, India emerged as number one, marginally beating South Africa. This year, India was pretty definitively number one. In the number two position, it was actually a tie. So it was a second place, a silver medal showing that was shared between South Africa and the Philippines. Now, I would just point out here that the news for a large number of people that's going to be very encouraging. I notice there's a lot of my friends from the South African outsourcing community on this call. South Africa was #1 with a bullet in the United States. That's very important to take into account. And like I say, it wasn't marginal. It was overwhelming. South Africa was really the choice of American enterprise CX buyers when it comes to offshore CX delivery. When it came to the third place showing, it was our friends in Malaysia who consistently have done very well. Now, keep in mind, Rod, Malaysia is a very strong option for the respondents that we had from Japan, from Singapore, and from Australia, which make up a significant number. Yeah, exactly. So that was very much a very strong regional play. But Malaysia also performed quite well in the other English language markets in the survey too. So certainly no slouch when it comes to offshore CX favorability in regard to that Asia Pacific powerhouse. Now, in fourth place, we have our Central European representation. That was Poland. Now, keeping in mind, Poland has got significant cachet in Germany, in the United Kingdom, to some degree, Italy, but as well, it's important to recognize it generally does quite well too in Australia, in the United States, and Canada. So while it's obviously, I think, more of a low-hanging fruit from a European context, it certainly does have a lot of favorability in some of the more offshore, far-flung markets. And there was a tie for fifth place, Rod. Two North African CX BPO powerhouses, a tie between Morocco, which we know is incredibly important when it comes to French language delivery, for Belgium and France, which form part of the survey from Europe, and from Canada's standpoint, in the province I live in Quebec. So certainly some great results there. Tied with Egypt, which has consistently been in the top 5 for several years now. And Egypt, again, a very, very strong cross-demand market favorability. And I would just like to point out here, Rod, as well, #1 in Germany. So certainly we were delighted with the results and very, very happy. And congratulations to all stakeholders in every one of the countries we just talked about.
Thank you, Peter. Just lastly on that, then, how can people get hold of the actual report itself?
They can get in touch with me. The report is for sale, and I'm more than happy to have a chat with anybody that would be interested in potentially taking it on. It certainly goes beyond that one question. The report itself is about 120 pages and goes into a fair amount of detail across a whole series of different themes and different topics. Now, Rod, you did ask me in the second half of your previous question to outline my thoughts a little bit around what organizations from the supplier side might want to do to position themselves. I mean, I think the key here is to recognize that every different demand market, whether it's a geographic market or an industry, will have its own pain points. It will be dealing with its own challenges. It will have its own priorities. In my opinion, the most important thing any organization can do from the BPO side, whether in South Africa or otherwise, is to take into account those concerns, those challenges the enterprises are dealing with, and to very quickly address them with realistic solution sets that are ones that are going to be in a position to alleviate those pain points and do it in a cost-effective manner, but emphasizing the quality. And also have a strong and, I would say, robust solution set when it comes to the different technology and professional services options they can bring to the table. It's no longer just a your mess for less. It's no longer a case of just shifting workstations. It's all about the value add.
Well, I think we're going to drill down into some of those driving points as we progress this afternoon. Mark, you've watched this whole thing from an analyst point of view. Impact of AI, it's a big question. Everybody asks, what is AI going to do to or for our industry? What have you been seeing, the impact of AI on CX, BPO, global business services? I know it's maybe early days, but what are you starting to see emerge?
Well, I think we're seeing a lot of really good technology that is utilizing AI in very innovative ways to improve the customer experience. And that's not just the customer experience, but the entire human experience, all the touch points that one would have with a customer. And we're certainly seeing the this technology increasing exponentially as we move forward. In fact, I don't think people can even keep up with the rapid rate of transformation that is taking place. And we did have a number of speakers that highlighted that at the event. Chris Gillen was one of them, where he spoke about the fact that there's this rapid evolution of AI and technologies associated with that, and the ethical concerns that are linked to that in terms of the deployment of AI and the ethical framework that would need to be in place to deploy it. But there was also the side-by-side stress that there still needed to be the human elements to augment the human talent with AI, to enable them with AI, rather than replace them with AI. And that was certainly one of the core themes and factors that came out from the event.
Traci, I'm going to throw a curveball at you. I know your passion for impact sourcing, job creation, etc. What is your view on the rollout of AI and its influence or impact on job creation? Not in any specific geography.
Yeah, no, definitely it's global, Rod, because just I always need to clarify this. Impact sourcing is not for African unemployed youth. Impact sourcing is global, and it's for individuals from marginalized communities, which happens worldwide. I've always said what's been very interesting, having played in the sector for nearly 30 years now, and watching just as trends happen. There's always kind of this trend of technology coming up, and then that doesn't work, and it's like, wait, actually we need to throw some processes at it, and then the processes start coming in after the technology piece, and then that doesn't work, and it's like, oh, it's about the people. And what I've seen is that trend and that spiral just keeps speeding up, and they're becoming closer and closer together, which is what we're seeing now. So when it comes to the people contingent around AI, I think to Mark's point, and I think anyone that's on this call right now will know that we know less than what we think we know. We don't know what we don't know, actually, when it comes to AI, which is what makes it a little bit scary. One of the things that we are seeing, though, is that we, for the first time ever, have multi-generational customers that are engaging with our CX operations, which means that some are not going to engage or interface with digital or AI. You still need the human contingent there. Equally, we as customers are becoming more complex, and our queries and engagements are more complex, which means that you need a human on the other side of that, which automatically and will, for, in my view, the foreseeable future, open up the space to have warm bodies, humans, individuals actually supporting and monitoring those interactions. And that will consistently open up the opportunity to bring in individuals from both a traditional sourcing perspective, but also from an impact sourcing perspective. So I still see that continuing. And I know that we are going to speak a little bit about around compliance, but I'm also seeing some of the trends coming out from the EU, which is really one of the first ones that's going to come out and is going to specify, if it hasn't already, and I don't have the final details on this, but that the client, the customer, is able to opt out of the AI or digital interface and interaction at any one point in time, and there needs to be a warm body on the other side should the client choose to do so. So, legislation is going to start specifying where the barriers at the moment are from an AI perspective.
I have seen, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, perhaps you know that I think Spain has been the first European country to introduce their legislation requiring human interface as an option. No doubt that will creep into the EU, and I'm sure the Ofcom people in the UK will pick up on that fairly quickly. So, Mark, in your opinion, assuming that type of legislation moves in, how do you see that impacting on, again, job creation? If there's a legislative or regulatory requirement for a human agent, how will that impact on the one hand, a massive trend towards automation? Peter will get a giggle out of it. Remember, we invented the word over-botterization. How will that impact on actual job creation?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. I get asked that quite a number of times by various organizations. And the research that we've conducted, and also research we've had access to, indicates that there is going to be job loss from AI. It's inevitable. You're going to see more automation coming through, and you're going to see job loss as a result. However, on the other end of the spectrum, there's also going to be job gain. And we are seeing new types of roles coming in, new types of job roles. So I believe that to some extent, agents as they stand now will either keep their jobs or they will be migrated into other job roles where they are being enabled by, or they are actually utilizing AI in very meaningful ways. And the stats show that the job gain will be more than the job loss. So that's an encouraging.
That's certainly
I think
encouraging.
I think it's something like 70% job loss, but 90 something percent or 94% job gain. So it's very interesting stats. I'm sorry, and that is at the entry level. I must should have stated that at the entry level jobs, or the jobs that have repetitive tasks and repetitive processes. Yeah. So
well, that's encouraging. Just looking at the attendees today, I see a lot of people representing the business development side of the BPO industry, no doubt looking at this to how do we expand the market. And there was a fascinating panel, one of them, I enjoyed them all, but Stephen Lloyd chairing the panel on mastering client acquisition in the BPO landscape. Pete, I'm going to throw this ball at you. What do you see as the strategies for success in terms of business development for BPO operators?
One of the things that I think came out from Steve's discussion was the fact that if an organization is to win new business, they need to think very differently than they would have even 3-4 years ago, Rod. We presented some statistics during that panel that Steve very ably chaired with some absolutely outstanding attendees from the panelist side. And one of the things that came out was the fact that the buying community is tired of these one-size-fits-all solutions, of the generic marketing speak that seems to come out to them. Relationships count. So being able to build relationships with a prospective buyer or with an existing buyer is going to be very important to really understand what the challenges and obstacles they're facing as an organization. And the second thing is that you've got to be able to come to the table with a solution set that's going to be comprehensive. Then once again, most buyers, most of the organizations in the buying community are not necessarily just looking for that agents at workstations model. They're looking for what value add you can bring. Most of the organizations in the key demand markets right now are facing a cash crunch budget-wise, and if they're being pressured by the boardroom to improve on the customer service KPIs, but at the same time they're having restrictions on the amount of money they can invest, that's obviously a circle that can't be squared. Now, that's where the outsourcer comes in. But the outsourcer's got to be able to market originally. They've got to be able to use the initial outreach channels that the buying community are looking for. They're looking for thought leadership. They're looking for subject matter expertise. And the business development community has really got to be the ambassador for their BPO, bringing forward this level of subject matter expertise and bringing forward this ability to reference perhaps existing clients in a vertical market or in a country. I would just make one final point on this too, Rod. When it comes right down to it, the research we have from the front office CX Omnibus survey shows that there is going to be an increase in the number of organizations, a significant increase, that are looking to try and either grow their slice of the outsourcing pie or that are going to be looking to outsource for the first time. So there's no better time to have a great married up strategy when it comes to business development.
Excellent. No, I totally agree with you on that one as well. But, the BPO operators, several of them before I left to go to the States, the question was, how do we bring back the business? And my reply has always been, and I think it was reinforced by the event in Atlanta, was you have to build trust. If you haven't got the trust, it's not about price anymore. Traci, I'm going to throw that one at you because it really moves into that area of decision making at on the buying side between price, performance, and the all important the ESG, the environmental, social, and the governance issues. And I know you've been very close to that. What's your take on that? I said, really messaging into the provider side, the operators. How should they be looking at that component of price, performance, and social?
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on our operators to be all things to all people at the moment, and I'm actually sympathetic for a lot of it that they have to report in on. But at the same time, and I think I mentioned at the event when we presented some of the early findings for the social impact index Thrive, is that as an industry we have an opportunity to seriously shift the needle globally on so many different levels. But what we're seeing from the buyers, and I think Mark will be able to speak to this in a little bit more detail, having run the buyers panel, but the buyer itself is becoming more mature. There's no longer that kind of disconnect between them and the operator itself. So they are looking, to your point, for trust. They're looking to partner with organizations. And we're seeing some of the trends that I'm seeing is more and more of your operators really focusing in on their niche, their sweet spot, and where there is a client, a client need to have multiple services supported, there may be a partnership between operators where they don't try and be all things to all people. So we are seeing a little bit of that. Having said that, I know Peter will probably throw the conversation out that there's also been a lot of M&As happening in convergence of operators as well. But your question really speaks to buyers and them looking at the broader ESG and DI aspect of what it is that our industry has to offer. And it's actually come from our industry that has pushed this up as an opportunity for buyers to do things in a more conscious way, in a more socially cohesive way, to help support the very communities and environments around them. In some cases, we're seeing, again, legislation coming in, like in the UK, where there's a lot of ESG legislation coming in, and organizations are going to have to start reporting in a specific way. If I quickly put on a South African hat, we all understand what that journey looks like if we look at our broad-based Black economic empowerment legislation that was brought into place. So we fundamentally understand that, which is where I think that the South African operators have a good sort of understanding of how to engage with those conversations when it comes to engaging with buyers and what it is that they should be considering and looking at. But it's really about you can improve what you measure, and a lot of the buyers are dipping their toe into the ESG and DEI pond, and others are full blown and they're sort of dictating what it is that they want to see. But again, one of the reasons that we're doing the index is to really get a good handle on what is the nub of it, and to make sure that everyone's speaking a consistent language and asking for the same thing, and there's not multiple forms and submissions that operators have to make for 10 different buyers, that it's actually consistently the same thing
and standardized.
I'll leave it at that.
Now, Mark, I'd be interested in your views on something that's been bugging me a little bit. The trip I did to the UK in September last year, and was privileged to engage with about 25 or 30 buy side, mostly in the retail segment. And the message I was getting from their gut feeling was that the deals were going to be around 1/3 price, 1/3 performance, and 1/3 in the ESG space. And there were even some indicators that the 1/3 ESG might expand to as close to 50% of the deal. And when I tested the water in the States, I was getting a different picture altogether. But I'd really be interested in your view on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ESG program in the UK and Europe is a lot more stronger. That's certainly something that we're picking up from the buy-side executives that we interact with. There is a lot more inculcated need in the enterprises in the UK, Europe to adopt ESG and DEI standards. In the US, not so much. In fact, there's been, I wouldn't say so much a stigma, but there's been sort of a lot of sort of side glances, frowns on the DEI, ESG sort of messaging. And so we are seeing organizations, however, that are very serious about it. There is a number of buy-side enterprises that are already outsourcing to Africa, for example, that have adopted impact sourcing as best strategies. And those are obviously, enterprises that are in the know, that realize the benefits of it, that it's not just charity, that it can actually contribute to their bottom line results. But we also still have yet to see a lot of adoption in it in markets like the US. There's still a long way to go, a lot of education that needs to be undertaken for them to realize it.
I think that reinforces my perspectives there as well. Traci, you touched on the Thrive Index. Why don't you just summarize it and then also maybe give the participants in today's session just some key takeaways on strategies for BPOs?
I think the strategies are definitely still going to be developed over time, depending on where they are. But the Thrive Index is the Human Rights Source Impact Value and Empowerment Index. And it was really initiated to start gathering some of the actual stats and data of what are organizations doing when it comes to their DEIB, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging focus within their organization. And equally on ESG, so the environmental, the social, and the governance side of things. And obviously there's an overlap there. The S overlaps nicely into the DEI side. And it's really, there were a couple of key questions, and we won't go into detail today, but we were looking at why is it that organizations have adopted impact sourcing, like what was in it for them. And I think what's important to mention is that the initial findings that were presented at CXOutsourcers are from a global community. Because I know I had one or two operators that pulled me aside from South Africa specifically, and we have, having launched impact sourcing out of South Africa in 2016, it's quite deeply entrenched. It's built into the incentives and a couple of other areas. So they were a bit surprised at some of the outcomes, but it's literally feeding back off of what Mark said now, that all things are not equal across different continents and buying communities across the geography. So it was really looking at why they adopted impact sourcing, and there's a number of questions that we asked them. What we did see, though, is that 100% of respondents definitely did say that it's looking to create a positive social impact for workers and their families and communities, which we know to be true when practicing impact sourcing. 4 out of 5 of the respondents are looking to access new sources of talent, which again we know really opens it up and creates a more diverse and equitable community that you're engaging with on behalf of your customers, which is important. Then also looking at how we want to know how is it that we're adopting inclusive and fair recruiting practices and different mechanisms that have been put in place for the operators to do that. Equally, we were looking at how environmental focuses and ESG has been pulled into the CX and BPO operations themselves. And that's where a lot of the sort of AI and tech and cloud usage is coming in, about how it is that they're making it easy to access knowledge and information. But from a green perspective, kind of moving away from not something that we use much in Africa anymore, but from your physical checks and payments and that, and going more online, and how it is that the operators themselves, when pitching and promoting to the buyer, are actually utilizing that ESG, their actual green policies to win more business. But what was interesting there is that only 20% of organizations are currently utilizing ESG as a sales pitch promotional point. And then the final 2 questions that we asked, and again, I haven't given the deep dive on each of the responses, but the value that organizations are seeing from hiring impact workers where they are. There's still a number of organizations that haven't really bedded down an inclusive hiring policy. But there's a big aspect, again, to look for a broader reach of talent into their environment, looking to save on the bottom line, and knowing that this will reduce their attrition rates, which is obviously going to be beneficial for them. And then finally, the value that they're seeing when they implement ESG practices. Some are saying that they are seeing winning of clients, and again, where we're seeing the shift coming from buyers, that more organizations need to report on that, and splitting it into a third for price and policies, etc. But only 1 in 5, for example, we're seeing a reduction on their costs with whatever it is that they've pulled in. And again, the environmental practices are going to differ per operator depending on where they've set up globally, and then within that environment, is it in a city or a town, etc. So a lot of work to be done, but as I said earlier, we will not be able to start improving until we start measuring, and that's really where the index sort of was born out of.
Okay, good. Thanks for that. I think let's just jump to some of the questions that have come up from participants today. Peter Beverly asked a question, what are the challenges for South Africa? And I think this is in the context of the Omnibus survey. We were 2021, we were number 1. We're now tying for number 2. So what are those challenges that could move any country up to the upper echelons of the annual survey? Just very briefly, maybe some ideas?
Sure. Let's keep in mind, I mean, South Africa's performed exceptionally well the past several years, and number 2 is certainly nothing to be sneezed at. My recommendation would be is that from an industry standpoint, South Africa's, I think, doing really, really well. And I've had exposure to the country for the last 2 decades. I've seen it go from a very disjointed, a very regionally driven sector to one that's incredibly married up and has a very cohesive nature about the value proposition it brings to the rest of the world. I would argue that right now, some of the bigger problems facing South Africa, or some of the bigger challenges, are not ones necessarily that the industry can address. The fact of the matter is, load shedding is reported commonly in North America and Western Europe and Asia Pacific. Some of the challenges around infrastructure and some of the political stability issues are elements that certainly are getting a lot of press, especially as we're going to the run-up to the election. Evidently, these are things that the industry can't paper over, or that they can't explain away. But at the same time, the fact is, there's a lot of countries around the world right now dealing with very similar challenges that don't necessarily have that same level of goodwill South Africa does. I think the industry has to focus on the best possible outcomes for the key demand markets and the key sectors that are most conducive to being serviced by South African agents, to make sure that the partnerships, I think it was Trace that mentioned this, having the right partnerships in place with other outsourcers around the world that might be able to pick the slack up. Maybe as an example, some of the linguistics that maybe a South African operator might not have readily at hand, they can certainly make that up with partnerships in different parts of the world, and making sure that the tech stack is as relevant as possible. And I think the key thing though, Rod, and this is something that I would strongly emphasize to the South African operators, emphasize the quality aspect. Do not go after the price point. South Africa is not known as a cheap destination. It should not be competing for cheap work. It needs to go after those higher level, higher margin type roles. If you can do that as a country, I think that your positioning is very solid in the top 5, and the potential to go back to number 1 in the near to medium term, I think, is very significant.
No, valuable inputs. Thanks on that one. Mark, we have a question from Eloise, which you can see in the chat box there. What are the thoughts around Sub-Saharan Africa creating shared services, growing the global GBS sector? Mark, you have some subject matter expertise, having done some deep dive research into the African BPO potential. I think it was also highlighted at the Atlanta event. Africa kept popping up in the discussions. And we had some really great representation from Egypt, from Nigeria, from South Africa. So what's your view on that? And if you could answer Eloise's question.
Well, yes, actually, so Africa definitely was very much on the agenda at the event. Definitely is being seen as the next frontier for GBS BPO services. And I think Eloise's second part of the question kind of answered it itself. She said, should geography stick to what they know and what they're best at? And my advice would be, yes, absolutely. And it just goes back to what Peter was saying earlier on as well. Each geography does have various strengths, whether it's in shared services, whether it's in talent, whether it's in cost, and to stick to their strengths. And for example, we just came from an event last week where I was in Kenya, and there's a big drive from the Kenyan BPO sector to promote technology and to promote Kenya as the digital hub of Africa. In South Africa, we have great shared services expertise in the provinces such as Gauteng, where there is entrenched F&A legal services and human resource management skills. So I think it is important that each region, each geography plays to its strengths, and that also should take place within at a national perspective. When you look at city by city, each city should also play to its strengths when engaging with the international market.
Actually, that's a good point you raised when you say city by city. I'm going to bounce ball back to you, Peter. I think that's one of your premises, is it not? That we should be looking at strengths of cities as opposed to larger geographical areas.
I think we have to be pragmatic. The reality is a country like South Africa is just like a country like Mexico, it's just like a country like Colombia or even Poland. The fact is we're talking about very large populations where you have centers of excellence. Some cities are going to be more apt or more centered on a particular technology or a particular type of service, or even, I think most especially important, Rod, linguistics. You know, there's a very different linguistic makeup, say in a Cape Town versus a Durban versus Johannesburg. And being able to identify what the strengths and weaknesses when you get down to that subnational or that regional state or even municipality level is so important. You know, I remember when I used to write reports on this stuff 20 years ago, and it was very much at the national point, in some cases even regions that you were looking at. But the level of granularity that anybody needs to get to now to figure out the value proposition about one location versus another within one country, I don't think has ever been so important as it is in 2024.
Excellent, thanks for that. Mark, you have a point you wanted to raise.
No, actually, I was just going to touch on earlier on what Peter was saying about the different nuances that we're seeing. So one of the panels that I was chaired at the CX Outsourcers 2024 event was the buy-side panel, and we had three executives on the panel from the US, the UK, and from Canada. Very interesting panel, and they got to share with the audience through rapid-fire presentations what they saw as being their pain points and their key criteria for appointing service providers. But then mixed into that, we've also done our own research with buy-side executives that belong to GBS World, which is our verification marketplace, and we were able to release some of those top-end results. And it's very interesting to see that cost performance benefits, 53% say that they're still, very much focusing on cost performance benefits, but 49% said that they look for track records of client success in their vertical industry. 44% said culture and trust is really important to them. And then 39% said multi-shore delivery footprints with diverse and scalable talent pools is really important. And what we're also seeing is that along with the cost message that's coming through, there's also this need for better customer lifetime value. So that's basically making sure that the customer is retained, the customer is looked after throughout the entire customer lifecycle journey. And in that process, the customer becomes more profitable, and as a result, to their bottom line. And that is another key trend that a lot of the buy-side executives highlighted as something that they want to focus on when they're looking at appointing any potential service providers, or even looking at locations that they base their services in.
This report of yours, the 2024 World Voice of the Client Survey, is it generally available, or is it for purchase, or freely available as a download?
It's freely available. So if anybody would like a copy, you can certainly ping me. If you don't have my email address, then I'm sure you'd be willing to share it with them, Rod. It's really available, and it's basically an ongoing survey, a real-time survey that we conduct with executives on the marketplace.
I think it'd be very valuable. What I will be doing, just so everybody knows, I'll be editing the video recording of this and making it available on YouTube by tomorrow. I'll also send out the links to everybody who's either registered or been on the call today, along with all the contact details of the panelists that we have today. So there's a lot more information available on that one. Traci, you were very involved in putting together the roundtable discussions that took place at the CX Outsourcers Mindshare 2 weeks ago. There were 7 specific groups. Can you just give a high level of how those groups were put together and the topics that were discussed, and maybe some of the high points that may have emerged from those panels?
Yeah, thanks, Rod. The roundtables are really enjoyed by the delegates. And we, if I recall, actually, when we did it the first time, it was really like, oh, that's a great question. Why don't we have a quick breakout? You go sit there, you go sit there. And then we've kind of evolved it from there. So one of the things that I didn't mention right in the beginning around CX Outsourcers is beyond us having our BPO community there as our convened delegate community, and obviously having our global subject matter experts and influencers coming through to present their findings, which Mark unpacked. We obviously can't host the event without key sponsors coming in. We limit the number of sponsors that come in to make sure that everybody gains value, that the latest sort of trends, services, technologies or whatever are also put into the room. So we really appreciated the partners that have come on board this far and continue to come on board. But the reason that I mentioned the sponsors is that some of the roundtable topics will align to what it is potentially that sponsoring partner has to offer as a service. But then others are really what are the top sort of trendy areas that we need to look at and consider, and again to get the competitors sitting around a table together to unpack and discuss. So this year, if I just really read off, we had 7 tables, as you mentioned. The first one was looking at uncovering emerging offshore and nearshore locations, and I remember from last year, I see Joel's actually on the call today. He hosted that session at last year's event, and that's always really well looked after. A lot of organizations really want to come and say, if I am going to look at emerging or going into a new location, what does it look like? And the very conversation that we just had now, looking at what is it that buyers are looking for, so doing a deep dive there. Then we looked at leveraging AI and analytics for performance and optimization. And again, we touched on that briefly earlier on the call. Talent acquisition and empowerment. So what does it really mean? Where do we find the skills once we get them in? How do we hold them, support them, empower them to deliver to our clients and customers? Security and compliance was a massive panel, and it was last year as well. And this continues to be a key topic when we do a bit of feedback with our delegates. What do you want to know about? This is an unknown area. So definitely one that's sought after. The impact of AI and the future of CX delivery. And we actually had Chris Gillen busy facilitating that roundtable. And then the final 2, looking at social impact, so looking at what we've already unpacked, impact sourcing, DEIB and ESG. And then very importantly, what we've just covered now is the BPO messaging for commercial development. The feedback I can't give you right now, because what we actually do is we record the sessions, we capture all the findings. We often have to herd cats when we're trying to break up the tables, because there's such great discussions that people don't want to leave the round tables. There's really rich and robust conversations going on at the round table. So for that reason, we actually record it, and then the team actually collates that information so that we can share that knowledge more broadly after the event, and really use it as a bit of a dipstick at that moment in time of what's happening, but then also to see where we are a year later if we run similar sort of conversations.
Excellent. One of the questions just come up in the chat line from Rodney saying is, are the access to the round tables available? So you've just answered that. I'm going to do something a little bit out of the ordinary. Joel Walker's asked us quite a lengthy question. Joel, I'm going to ask you to come in live, if you will, and pose your question to the panel. Joel, you're live.
Thanks, Rod, and I'm assuming the technology is working and you can hear me. So firstly, thank you for giving us the insight for those that couldn't make it. Glasgow was fantastic. Atlanta seemed brilliant, and I look forward to next year's. My question was, you had some of the world's leading providers in the room who are very good at selling classical BPO services. I wondered what the panel thought from that audience were people's ambitions for the commercialization of AI in our industry. So we can debate the merits of it and whether it's, all of the impact of it is a much longer discussion. But I wondered if there was any conversations in the room around how to commercialize AI, either as agent assist or putting that into the customer. Sorry, that's a difficult question, which is probably why Rod's thrown it to me to throw back.
That's it, so absolutely.
Apologies for the hospital pass.
Okay, I'm going to pass that one to Peter, I think, to start off with.
So great to catch up, Joel, after we saw each other last week in Manchester. Always a pleasure to hear your voice and to get your thoughts about what I think is a very contentious topic. Look, in my opinion, right now, there's a great deal of discussion about the commercialization of AI, but in typical fashion in our sector, I don't see a tremendous amount of leadership from any one outsourcer looking to try and take the plunge in terms of how this can really be taken in from a commercial aspect. Now, you made the reference to the agent assist. Now, I see that as very low-hanging fruit right now, and we are starting to see some green shoots of that from a number of different solutions providers. That's where I see an immediate application for this technology. But equally speaking, I am starting to see, going beyond the Space 1999 40,000 foot view debate that's been going on LinkedIn for the last 18 months. I'm actually starting to see some real application when it comes to the real-time voice translation, which is beginning to show in its own form the green shoots about how AI, generative AI, can be applied to the contact center. Now, I'm not going to say that it's fully baked yet. I think we're probably it's probably in its infancy, and that the outsourcing community needs to be careful not to position it as being further ahead than it actually is. We've seen this movie played out before. We know how it ends over the course of the past 15, 20 years with various technologies. But I am very excited what I've seen from a number of different providers in terms of how they can take that real-time voice translation and take it out to the clients over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. And what I would say is that will be, to use a parlance from the early part of the 2000s, a real game changer once this actually takes place.
Thank you for that, Peter. We're almost on time. Traci, I want to ask you something very close to your heart, I think. You have close relationship with BPO organizations, professional bodies, etc. What are your takes on the CX outsourcers and the message to the associations and what they can or should be doing to support operators on the one hand, and to provide some comfort or just standards, another side of the coin, to the buy-side executives? So I think the bigger question is the role of the associations or the professional bodies.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. I mean, it's quite a big question, but as you rightly said, it's something that's close to my heart. I've had the lovely benefit of being involved in the South African Association since its inception, actually in the late 90s, and really just watched how that process has unfolded for the South African community, and equally engaged with a couple of other associations across, more specifically, the African continent. But they play a key role in offering that trust that you were speaking about earlier, that buyers are looking for from clients, but they offer that neutrality when engaging with the global buyer community. But they really are that center connection point between your buyers and your public-private partnership that needs to work together in order for a geography or for a city to activate what it is that they're promising to the global community and the buyer. They really are, the same as CX Mindshare is the convener of the BPOs globally. Each of the associations is the convener of that local community where, again, whatever the problems are, the challenges, the aches and pains, they can then go and lobby the authorities, be it government or municipality or other, to pull in together to bring in standards like around skills, like around operational excellence, if that needs be, or to vet and ensure that whoever is coming into the market are really above board and are going to do right by that country or geography. I have a fundamental issue when it comes to any fly-by-night wannabe operators. So it's really bringing in that aspect of excellence and again, being that convening community to gather in all the relevant insights and intel. The buyers themselves will get the data, they'll do the desktop research, they'll engage with an intermediary community or analysts purchase the research, but then at the end of the day when they land, they'll engage with the operator, but then they want to have that information verified by that neutral body, that neutral party, which is where I see the role, a part of the role of the industry body playing. I see it as a fundamental one.
So we could go on for hours with extending some of these discussions. We're into wrap up. Mark, any specifics? And tell us about CXO 2025.
Yes, no, thank you, Rod. So we're very excited to announce that we've booked the next venue in Munich. So the next event will be held also in May in Munich, the 7th and 8th of May 2025. The bookings are open, so if you go to CXOutsourcers.com, you will see that the registrations are open for that event. And we're very excited about the program that we had. So we had the opportunity to poll and to survey a lot of the delegates post-event, and they gave us a lot of good and meaningful feedback that we are going to be adopting. As both Traci and Peter alluded to, there's a community that's being formed here, and this community is growing. It's becoming more like a family, and so we want to nurture that family. And you're going to see a lot more innovative and a lot more interesting activities from us as we actually chart that path forward.
Wonderful. Well, all things being equal, I look forward to a beer or three in Munich in 2025. Peter, last words.
Look, a big thank you, Rod, for the opportunity to address the incredible group of people you brought together today. A big thanks to Traci and to Mark for their friendship and partnership in the CXO initiative. You know, we all bring our own strengths to the table, and I think that's what has made CXO such a success over the years. And I would just say, you know, Traci has got a special talent about reining Mark and I in on some of our more outlandish ideas. Mark has got an absolute level of positivity I've never seen from anybody else in my life, and it's always a sunny day when we get on a call with him. And we do these planning sessions over the course of 12 months, and I always say to people, these are the Zoom calls I don't dread, these are the Zoom calls I look forward to. So you know, just it's a wonderful initiative, and thanks for taking the time to work with us today, Rod, to highlight what we're doing at CXO. Look forward to seeing everybody in 2025 in Munich.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you. First, let's go around ladies first. Traci, thank you so much. But I think to all three of you, thank you for the privilege of inviting me to Atlanta. I enjoyed every single minute of it and made wonderful friends, as you said, and felt really part of the family. And so, Traci, for all your behind the scenes, I know the nightmares, the hassles, the frustrations must have been significant, but you pulled it off with aplomb. Mark, once again, thank you for going on for almost 20 years of friendship and cooperation and working together. It's a privilege as well. And Peter, I do remember that.
Can I also just interrupt you? We're missing one golden point that actually happened at the last event. Your award. So you received a Lifetime Achievement Award for your role in the industry, and I think everybody should applaud you for what you've done for the sector and how much you've put into the sector. Like I said earlier on, you've mentored me, you've mentored a lot of other people, and I think a shout out to you for the excellent work and the excellence that you brought to the sector. So, you know, I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you once again, all three of you, for that award. I'm at a loss for words. Peter, you have the last word here. And as I said, I think we started our friendship almost 20 years ago as well, at an event at Dimension Data, I think, if I remember correctly. And then many a good whiskey at my bar as well. So would you do the honors of wrapping up today's proceedings, please?
You bet. Well, thank you for that, Rod. And just as a wrap up, I would like to thank everybody who took the time for joining us for the past hour. It's great to see such a level of enthusiasm and interest in CX outsourcers. We have built a global community, and I think I speak for Traci and for Mark when I say it's a privilege for the three of us to be at the center of that. I don't know when we started this out if we actually anticipated it would become what it has become, but we certainly couldn't be more pleased and frankly more humbled to be at the center of what's been going on in this regard.
Thank you for that, and I think that's just the wrap up for the day. But fabulous session. I think we should do this more often. And I will certainly keep this group of people who've attended today and or registered as a special group of people whose interests we all share. Thank you once again, everybody.
Thank
and
you.
Thanks to everybody for sharing time with us today. Thank you.